Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. A very good morning or good evening or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're joining us from today. My name is Sunit Runhar, and today we're going to be discussing trolls in a basement when security culture and customer service collide. And this session today is all about communication, communication, communication. To give you an idea of what you can expect from this session today, we'll kick things off looking at examples of good and not so good communication. From there, we'll bring it back to the security world and look at why it's so crucial to get even the simplest of instructions just right. Then we'll use the remaining time to build a security engagement and communications program together, looking at things like supporting infrastructure, brand assets, and the art of the response. Now, before we actually dive into today's presentation, I imagine that quite a few of you looked at the title of this presentation and thought, where on earth did this come from? Well, it was actually inspired by a former colleague of mine. So a couple of years ago, we were having lunch together and I was chatting to him about some of the projects we were working on within the security department, when he suddenly put down his sandwich, looked at me very seriously and said, you know, sometimes it feels like security are just a bunch of trolls in a basement. You never hear them, you never see them, but a couple of times a year, they'll emerge from their cave, yell at us about phishing emails or something before they go stomping right back off into the dark. And you know what? His comment got me thinking because frankly, he was right. We'd never given much thought to how the workforce viewed us. We just sent stuff out and assumed that they'd gotten the message. But what did they think of security? Were we annoying? Did they find us helpful? Honestly, were they giving us any thought at all? And if we changed our image, if we tried to change the way we were perceived within our organization, would this have a noticeable difference on our security awareness and culture? So as you can imagine, these questions led me down a rather long, but ultimately rewarding and really fascinating journey, where I learned a lot about the common PR pitfalls that we as security teams fall into and how we can get stuck into echo chambers of our own making. I learned a lot over the course of this very long journey. So today I would love to share some of the things that I have learned with you. Now, if you're about to embark on a new journey of learning and experience, you usually want to start by looking at the masters, the people who have gotten it right. And in my journey, I found who, in my opinion, a company that has absolutely nailed the science of clear instruction giving and communications, which is, of course, Lego. I mean, they've got 12-year-olds willingly spending hours poring over an instruction manual to build a realistic model of the Death Star. Now, if you are a Lego enthusiast yourself, or maybe your kids have Lego, do yourself a favor and go grab the box and take a closer look at the instruction manual and the blocks themselves. Probably the first thing you'll notice about the instruction manual is that there's almost no written text. Rather, it features detailed drawings of each block that you need, how they fit together, and of course, how the model will look as it evolves over time. The real genius in this, however, is the blocks themselves. They have been designed to minimize miscommunication and confusion. They're different shapes, they're different sizes, they're different colors, even subtle shades are different. And even if two blocks have to look similar for design purposes, one might have a very distinctive feature to help you tell them apart. So basically, from start to finish, Lego has given really, really clear thoughts about how they can minimize miscommunication, make sure their instructions are received correctly, and maybe you can even have some fun along the way. Now, for every example of great communication, there must be an equal and opposite example of bad communication. And a place where we tend to see this the most is actually in signs. Road signs, traffic signs, building signs, direction signs. There can be some very good ones. There can be some very bad ones. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of these together. Now, before we play this game together, I would love you to imagine just for a moment that you don't speak any English. Or maybe you do speak English, but for whatever reason, you have great difficulty reading written text. So keeping this in mind, with this mindset, what do you think of this particular sign? Now, you might recognize the universal symbol for parking, recycling, and of course, the arrows are pointing you in the direction that you need to go. But if you can't understand the text itself, the sign can actually be quite confusing. I would, for example, think that the top part of the sign is pointing me to a parking lot for something. I'd actually think that the bottom one was taking me to a parking lot for a recycling depot or center. So from a universal communication perspective, this is not particularly helpful. Now, what would you think of this sign? Personally, I find this to be quite effective, but maybe not for the reason that the original designers intended, because I don't know about you, but if I was driving around and saw a sign warning me about the lizard people and their families who live in the neighborhood, you best believe I would be slowing down and keeping a very sharp eye out for them. Now, the next sign to me is an example of really excellent universal communication. So right off the bat, the first thing you notice is that it is a very bright, eye-catching color designed to draw your attention immediately. Next, you have a clear illustration of someone wearing a face mask or face covering of some kind. And beneath that, the universally understood green check mark, telling you that what you are seeing, this is the correct thing. This is what you are meant to be doing when you're in this area or from this point forward. So regardless of the language that I speak, the biases I might have, whether I even want to follow the instruction itself or not, either way, in a single glance, everything I need to know has been communicated to me effectively and quickly. So we've now taken a look at some examples of good and not so good communication out in the wild. Let's bring this back to the world of security. Whether we intended it to be this way or not, security communication often boils down to a very strict set of instructions. In every resource we provide, in every training we give, in every message we send out, at its heart, it is two very long lists saying do this and do not do that. But effective communication is so much more than just the instructions that we are giving. And when we are not communicating these instructions effectively, even the simplest of them can start to fall apart. Questions like, is the workforce even seeing the instruction that I'm giving to them? Are they understanding it correctly? If they have received it and they followed it down to the letter, does it even work? And crucially, for those of us in security organizations, how do we get them to keep following these instructions, even when it would be so much more convenient for them not to do so? When we start picking apart the typical instructions we send to the workforce with these types of questions, you can see how quickly they can be open to misinterpretation. If you don't believe me, let's walk through a quick example of one that I'm sure each and every one of us at some point has either sent or received. Report suspicious activity to security. Simple, right? Surely there's no room for miscommunication or misunderstanding here. Now, the first thing you want to do before you even consider the instruction itself is ask yourself, is the workforce even seeing this instruction that I'm sending to them? Let's assume, for example, that you want to send this out to as a company-wide email as part of your regular security reminder and awareness efforts. Does your email look like this? The instruction is there, but it's buried in like the fourth line of text. You've probably stopped reading after line 2. The email is boring. It looks exactly the same as every other email that people have received that day, and it's very easy to overlook or miss. Or does it look something like this? Quite in your face, I completely grant you, but it is straight to the point. The message is front and center. It is bold. It is colorful. It is designed that you cannot miss it or overlook it by accident. Now, let's take a look back at the instruction itself and break it down into its fundamental components. Firstly, report. How exactly do you want your employees to report things to security? Is there a single channel? Are there multiple channels? Have you previously told them about this channel or the multiple channels? If they do go to the effort to report something, is it really easy for them to do so? Or is it annoying and confusing and time-consuming and just a ton of forms that they have to fill out? Next up is suspicious activity. What exactly does this mean? Have you previously provided your workforce with a list of things that you would consider to be suspicious and worthy of being reported? Does the definition of what is suspicious change depending on the geographic region you're in, the time of day, maybe even the employee who's carrying out said activity? And lastly, who exactly is security in your organization? Many organizations that I've worked in, for example, have more than one. And they also have very different definitions of what is suspicious activity and the reporting channels that they prefer to be communicated with. Does your workforce know who your security teams are? Frankly, do they care who your security teams are? So a really simple example, but what I hope it has illustrated is that even the simplest of instructions can fall apart very quickly if they're not backed up by effective communication and supporting infrastructure. Now, for those of us who work in this industry, who are security awareness and communications professionals, we have to get out of a mindset where security communication is a one-way street from our teams to the workforce. True engagement, when someone really grapples with a topic and thinks about it and finds ways that they can plug it into their day-to-day activities, true engagement is a dialogue, and it requires that both parties in that dialogue hear, but also understand each other clearly. So how do we do this? How do we go from just sending out message to building out that dialogue, to building and fostering that trust between our security teams and the organizations that we are working with? Now, you might have a different experience, and I would love to hear about that. But from my experience personally, the best way to do this is to treat your organization and its people as your customers, and you as security are service providers to them. Think about it. If you were an actual business out in the real world, how would you go about winning the attention and hopefully money of your potential customers away from your competitors who are also trying to grab their attention? If you've won their business and their interest, how do you go about making sure that each and every interaction you have with them is smooth, helpful, maybe even so enjoyable that they decide they want to keep coming back for more? So this is perhaps foreign territory for a lot of us. This is not necessarily a way that we have been brought up or shown for a security communications and engagement program to work. So I understand if this is new and a little bit scary. But from this point out, we're going to build this program together, and we're going to break it down into practical phases that you can apply in your own security communications and engagement programs. So let's kick things off. You can break down your communication and engagement strategy into 4 main phases. The first one of which is building your brand and voice. What image do you want to portray to the workforce? How do you want to be perceived when you interact with them? Next, coming up with a really great strategy, making sure that every interaction with your workforce counts and isn't a waste of time. Next, the one channel to rule them all, funneling all questions and concerns into one place. And lastly, by far the most important one of all, respond to everything. We're going to take a look at each of these 4 phases in more detail, and we'll start things off with your brand and voice. Now, you might recall earlier in the example that I showed, the very first question I asked was, how do we make sure that our workforce are even seeing the messages that we're trying to get to them, the instructions that we're trying to give to them? Particularly if you work in a very large organization, thousands of people across different time zones and geographies, you know as well as I do that we are hit over the head every single day with 1,000 different messages and emails. And apparently they're all equally important and urgent. So when there's a lot of noise, you have to make sure that you're standing out. And you have to make sure that your message is not getting missed in the chaos of all those other messages. So how do we go about doing this? The very first thing, long before you have crafted your first message, drafted your first training, any interaction with your workforce directly, long before that, the first thing you have to decide as a team, as a department, as security, how do we want to be seen? What is the image we want conjured up in the minds of our employees every single time they think about security? A couple of ideas to get the creative juices flowing. Is this your image spirit animal? Are you sweet, kind, caring? No problem is too big or small. Every time someone's come away with interacting with you, they feel like they've gotten a warm, fuzzy hug. Is this more your speed? All security, all corporate, all serious, all the time. No mucking about, we're here to get things done. Or are you somewhere in between? Are you a little bit funky, a little bit playful, just the right amount of seriousness? Now, the image that you choose to portray to your workforce, whatever it might be, this will ultimately shape your voice. And this voice needs to be completely consistent across each and every engagement that you have with your workforce. Every poster, every email, every training, every single interaction. So once you found your brand and voice, now you want to make sure that you are recognizable. What is it that makes you visually distinguishable from all the other messages that people are receiving on a day-to-day basis? This is where your brand assets come into play, and it can be anything that makes you instantly recognizable. Maybe it's a very vivid or particular color palette that you use in all your communications. Perhaps you prefer to use specific icons or images in everything that you send out. Even the font you choose can help to make you stand out from the noise of the rest of the crowd. Now, very few security professionals, myself included, that I have met at least, have a background in design or branding or marketing. So I completely understand if this feels like foreign territory to you. But there's lots and lots of resources out there that can help you on your brand and voice journey. If you are lucky enough to have an in-house design, brand, or marketing team, definitely make use of them. They will save you a lot of time. If you don't have that luxury, there's still lots of resources available to you. Platforms like Canva have millions and millions of templates that are beautiful that you can either take inspiration from or even use to design your own communications. Alternatively, there are platforms such as Unsplash or the Noun Project that have lots of high quality images or iconography that you can use for free in internal non-commercial projects. And this is really just a very small sample of some of the resources that are out there. So definitely make use of them and explore. Now, you found your brand, you've shaped your voice. It's time to get communicating. And this is where we really want to put our customer service hats on and ask ourselves, how can we make each and every interaction smooth, enjoyable, and helpful? As you are formulating your communications and engagement strategy, there are three main questions that you need to ask yourself. The first one is how. How are you communicating with your workforce? Now, no two organizations tend to have the same communications culture. In some companies, if it didn't come over email, it's not important. Others are more relaxed in their approach and will communicate both essential and non-essential information through informal channels like Slack or Teams. If you're at a very small organization that's literally maybe just one office, things like posters or in-person events can be far more engaging with your workforce. How frequently are you communicating with them? Is it weekly, monthly, or do you really only engage when you absolutely have to? Next is what. What are you communicating with your workforce? What is so critical that you must communicate it to them as soon as possible and in as much detail as possible? Every single time we engage the workforce, we are essentially dragging their attention away, demanding it away from the things that they consider to be more important, probably their day-to-day job. So if you're going to demand their time and attention, you have to make it count. You have to ask yourself, what is so important that they need to know it? And how do I keep it succinct, short, and straight to the point? Make every single engagement count and don't make it feel like you are wasting their time. Lastly, where? Where are you communicating with your workforce? Your job, unfortunately, is not done once you have drafted your email or designed your poster. This is where the role of supporting infrastructure starts to play, and it can help you make your messages far more interactive or engaging and eye-catching while staying succinct and to the point, but still giving your workforce an opportunity to learn more if they want to. What do I mean by this? Let's look at a practical example of an email that you have to send out to your workforce, warning them about a new phishing scam that's making the rounds. And you've decided to send a company-wide email because you've done your research and identified that important information is communicated by email. You can keep the core message, warning them about how to recognize the phishing email, where to report it, and what to do if they feel they've fallen victim to it. You can keep all of that information much shorter and to the point if you use supporting infrastructure, for example, such as links. Maybe those links take you to internal websites that your team maintains and keeps up to date, or external links like websites or articles where they can learn more. If the message itself is more instructional in nature, follow these clear steps if you see X, Y, or Z, then using things like images, videos, or even GIFs can be far more effective in communicating your message and getting people's attention. Are you making use of things like surveys, competitions, internal and external learning opportunities? This is your supporting infrastructure that helps you keep your core message tight whilst giving your workforce the opportunity to learn more if they wish to. Now, you don't need to be a hardcore sci-fi or fantasy nerd like me to probably have heard of the One Ring from The Lord of the Rings. Now, unfortunately, poor Gollum's obsession with the precious clearly did not work out very well for him, but there's still a really important message here for us as security awareness professionals. You may recall that earlier I alluded to the fact that many organizations might have more than one security team. In fact, every place that I've ever worked has always had a very distinct information security and physical security team. Now, if you're sitting in one of these teams, and there could be more than two, if you're sitting in one of these teams, you know the differences between you and the other teams. You know that you look after this and they take care of that, and they have resources for these things, and you only respond to that sort of stuff. That's great if you know the differences between your teams. Not a single one of those differences should mean anything to your workforce. As far as they need to be concerned, you are one big happy security family to whom they can direct any questions or concerns of a security nature to. If you are forcing your workforce to learn 10 different emails for 10 different teams, and worse, you scold them if they report something to the wrong team by accident, you are practically guaranteeing that they are going to avoid interacting with security as much as possible in future. As far as is practically and logistically possible, because it isn't always possible, I acknowledge that, but as far as it is, try to maintain the one channel to rule them all. The one email address or reporting form or whatever it is that you use as your central intake platform for all security questions and concerns. Who marshals which resources, who responds to what, that is for your teams to figure out internally behind the scenes. Do not put that burden on your workforce. Maintain one channel, one security reporting channel to rule them all. Now, the last piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, is the most important one of all, and that is respond to everything. We tend to get caught up as security professionals in making sure that the workforce has the instructions and are doing the right thing. But we can focus so disproportionately on making sure that they are reporting things to us that we don't necessarily stop to think whether we're actually set up to effectively and quickly respond to these queries and concerns when they come in. If we're unable to do so, that will actively harm all the engagement efforts and trust that you have built to this point. If I was to ask each and every one of you in turn on this call, tell me about a time that you had just absolutely shocking customer service. That time when your email apparently went into a black hole, never to be seen again, or you were on hold for so long that you were pretty sure you were going to hit retirement before someone actually picked up the phone. A customer service experience so bad that you told yourself you would never, ever again interact with this provider. We don't want that as the experience when the workforce comes to us. If someone is contacting security because they are genuinely fearful, there's something that is causing them anxiety or that they have seen is a problem on the horizon, don't leave them feeling like no one's listening or that no one is going to do anything about that. Now, on the flip side of the spectrum, I'm sure each and every one of us has at least one story of an absolutely fantastic customer service experience. That time when someone answered all of your questions quickly, they provided lots and lots of helpful detail. Maybe they even started solving a problem in the future that you hadn't even anticipated yet. That is the experience that we want to leave with our workforce each and every time they engage with us. Because let's be honest, if they are following our instructions, if they have taken the time out of their day to come to us and tell us something that we need to be aware of, they should be treated like what they are, which are heroes who are not only helping us to do our jobs better, but are doing their parts to keep each and every single person in your organization safe. Believe me when I say that if you get anything right in your awareness and communication and engagement program, this is the thing to focus on. So make sure that your teams, yes, remember, we are all one big happy security family, regardless of our internal differences. Make sure that your teams are set up for success. When you have your one channel to rule them all, and you are funneling all questions and concerns of security-related matters into that place, make sure that you have set up your internal triage and response systems so you can look at the issue quickly, assess what needs to be done, and of course, respond to let the original reporter know that you are on it or what the solution needs to be. And I do mean respond to everything. From time to time, particularly you might notice as your engagement program starts gaining a lot of traction, you might notice that people are actually coming to you about issues that are not security related. Maybe it's a job for finance or it's more in HR's wheelhouse. Don't ignore those kinds of queries when they come in. They've still come to you for help after all. Respond to them. Take the time to thank them for reaching out. Maybe you're not the team this time, but here are the contact details of a team who can help with this query. Respond to absolutely everything. Now, there's one fun level up that you can add to a response program, and that is a rewards program. This is kind of the stage in your program where your program is starting to really gain traction, you're starting to get people's attention, and you've noticed that your workforce are now becoming more proactive in their reporting. Maybe they've spotted an issue that your team weren't even aware of yet, or they've done something that generally you want to encourage that kind of behavior and keep making them report things proactively and think about security proactively. Your rewards can be absolutely anything. I've seen examples at other companies where the rewards program involves giving companies swag. Maybe they win an extra day of vacation. I've seen really, really serious incidents that have been caught early where even cash bonuses have been offered to the employee who spotted and reported the issue. What I do really want to point out about a potential rewards program is that it does not need to cost money to be effective. What you're seeing in front of you is something similar to a digital certificate that I once mocked up to send to employees who were starting to either proactively report concerns or maybe had passed a particularly grueling phishing simulation that we had run. This took me maybe 30 minutes to mock up in Canva. It cost us absolutely nothing except a little bit of time and effort on my part. And believe me when I say that no one was more surprised than me to see how this absolutely made people's day when they received this silly little digital certificate. I even saw people printing it out and proudly displaying it on their desks in the offices. Basically, it does not need to cost money to have meaning and to have impact. But when you have made someone feel like they are part of something bigger, when they feel like they have done something to help keep their little corner of the world safe and secure, that has real value and meaning. And that, as we also say, is that. I apologize if that felt like a complete whirlwind of information today. We covered a lot of ground in a very short space of time. But hopefully some of the things that we have discussed today have been helpful for you. You might have learned something or gotten the creative juices flowing, and you might take this forward in your own organization's security communications and engagement program. But I am here happy to answer any questions you have, happy to hear any thoughts that you might have on experiences of wins and losses that you've had. So please do reach out with any questions. Thank you.